doesn't go away. So you can either live with it forever, or you can do something about it.
Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in the Thunderbolts asterisks. Now, before we get rolling, I just got to do a little dance here because this is the best Marvel movie since Guardians 3. I am so excited for what this movie means for Avengers Doomsday, Fantastic Four, Secret Wars, Vision Quest, and I really feel like this cinematic universe is finally on an upswing. As always, remember you can listen to us on all your favorite podcast platforms and check out our merch store for fun parody merch that we designed for you. And I am so excited to show you guys these new Thunderbolts soccer team shirts, sponsored by Shane's Tire, and you can even customize the team member with different names on the back. Links are below. At the opening, the Marvel Studios logo now features comic books of the Sentry. Appropriately, this image is slowly taken over by darkness and the Marvel fanfare grinds to a halt. Now, I gotta take a second to celebrate the Sentry's adaptation in this film because I am a huge fan of the character's original run of the comics. He was created by Paul Jenkins and Jay Lee as a kind of Marvel's answer to Superman. He starts as an ordinary guy, an alcoholic named Bob Reynolds, who has dreams that he is a superhero. And then he gradually remembers that he was a superhero, the greatest hero on Earth, but somehow everybody forgot him. So the series is actually about him gradually remembering his past and reminding other heroes, and that he's trying to get more powerful before his archenemy, the Void, returns. So in the comics, the fact that he is the Void is a major twist. It's why I didn't want to spoil it in our early trailer breakdowns. And they also did this cool thing where Wizard Magazine ran an article claiming that the Sentry was originally created by Stan Lee, but then everybody just kind of forgot about the character, which is, you know, what actually happens to the Sentry in the comics. So the comic ends with the Sentry allowing himself to forget that he was ever a hero to remove the threat of the Void. Basically what happens in this movie, but I highly recommend the comic if you've never read it. So we start with Yelena on the roof of the second tallest building in the world, Merdeka 118 in Malaysia. And Florence Pugh actually jumped off this building in real life, and she had to lobby Kevin Feige directly for permission because the insurance rates were so high. Now, I think this movie does a pretty great job with its exposition, explaining everybody's backstory as they meet each other and introduce themselves. And even though we did a Thunderbolts recap video, I am going to give you a very brief rundown on each character as we start to talk about them. Yelena Belova was the spy sister of Natasha Romanoff, and in the Black Widow movie, they took down the Red Room assassin program that had brainwashed them. Afterwards, she reached an emotional catharsis for Natasha's death, but as we see here, she's still feeling listless.
Just a void.
And that line, the Void, is crucial for setting up the theme of the movie. Each of the Thunderbolts are broken in some way. They all have this void inside themselves because the movie is actually a metaphor for dealing with depression and trauma. You'll notice even the color palette of the movie is very desaturated, almost till it's black and white, until the Void is finally defeated at the end of the film and everything becomes bright and saturated. And she also says,
"There's something wrong with me."
And this is the nature of depression. You feel like there's something wrong with you, something broken, and as a result, you feel like you're unworthy of love or a family. So, as we talk about each character overcoming their depression, we see that this prepares them for their newfound family, the New Avengers. For a moment, it even seems like she could be taking her own life before the parachute opens, and she says,
Or maybe I'm just bored.
And this line sets up the opening fight. See, everything about this first sequence is kind of typical. We've seen a million Marvel hallway fights, so this one is just filmed from above, mostly in silhouettes. And you can also say that there's something meta going on here. Marvel has been in a little bit of a slump lately, and fans aren't actually showing up for every single movie because they feel like they know what to expect.
Welcome to the MCU, by the way. You're joining at a bit of a low point.
So when the movie starts, Yelena's bored, we're bored, and this all feels very 9 to 5. And then it turns out that she's actually narrating to her hostage. Now, we have seen this before in Marvel movies. Whenever a movie starts with a voiceover, it always turns out to be a character talking to other characters. Korg is talking to children in Love and Thunder, Thor was talking to Surtur, and in Iron Man 3, Tony narrated to Bruce Banner.
I'm sorry. I'm not that kind of doctor.
The only exceptions here are Deadpool and She-Hulk, who are the only characters who talk directly to us. Now, I thought the Thunderbolts worked so well because, unlike some Marvel movies, it's about characters who feel like real people. They're all broken or grieving or just failures. And they all have flaws and something about themselves that they're trying to work on. And we can all relate to that.
Why, are you a disgraced Captain America?
Well, kind of, but I'm not allowed to talk about it. But I do also have some gross habits that I've struggled to beat. Like you guys know, I talk about it all the time here on on the channel, you've probably seen my facial tic where I want to squish my eyes or clench my jaw, and I used to nervous eat all the time. And I'm sure you guys have your own bad oral fixation habits that you'd like to change. Now, I used to think that it was impossible to quit all of those bad habits, and it turns out I was right. Because I couldn't just quit, I had to replace. And that is where Fume comes in. No vapor, no nicotine, just natural flavored air that actually satisfies. No stress, no withdrawals, just a simple swap. Guys, Fume is an award-winning flavored air device that draws flavor into your mouth and not into your lungs. It is a great way to satisfy my oral fixation habit with non-toxic flavors, and it is safe to use anywhere. So I want to show you guys, there is no vapor at all in here. This does not need batteries, and you don't have to charge it. It just has these flavor-based cores that you can personalize with your favorite flavors, like crisp mint or my favorite, orange vanilla. It tastes like an orange dreamsicle, one of my favorites from when I was a kid. Also, it looks cool. I love how it's weighted, I love the wood design, and it feels just premium in your hand. And it's also a great fidget tool that makes this incredibly satisfying sound. It is completely safe, and they continuously invest in third-party studies to ensure the safety of their products, and it is backed by doctors here in the United States. Physiology shows stopping a bad habit cold turkey is really hard on your brain, so Fume works to replace your hand-to-mouth fixation, calming nervous tension through fidgeting, and distracting you from your bad habit with this delicious flavor. Fume has already helped more than 500,000 people build better habits. So try Fume today, and if you order the Journey Pack now using our code ScreenCrush, you'll get a free Fume topper, an awesome accessory to level up your experience. Go to tryfume.com/ScreenCrush or scan the QR code on screen right now. Now, back to what I was saying. And then Yelena finds a guinea pig in a maze, and this is some clever foreshadowing. The guinea pig is an experimental test subject, just like Bob, and the movie ends with the Thunderbolts running through the maze of Bob's mind. But Yelena is the one who ultimately frees Bob from his mental prison, just like she frees the guinea pig here.
And I will call him Lieutenant Fluffy Cheeks.
Very good. So apart from Lieutenant Fluffy Cheeks, there is something ominous in the lab. These shadows on the wall. Director Jake Shear, who, by the way, give him more movies to direct, he said that the shadows were meant to be symbolic of the Hiroshima shadows.
What's that?
Well, when the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, the blast was so intense that it burned shadows of people onto the walls and burned their bodies to ash. You see, the powers of the Sentry are another kind of atomic bomb. Val worked to create the Sentry, but she really didn't know what she had created. Just like American scientists created the atomic bomb, and then soon the whole world was under threat of nuclear war. In the MCU, superheroes are the real nuclear weapons. I mean, Ross even compared heroes to nukes in Civil War.
If I misplaced a couple of 30 megaton nukes, you can bet there'd be consequences.
And then we go to Capitol Hill for the impeachment of La Contessa Valentina Allegra de la Fontaine, who was originally created by one of the all-time greats, Jim Steranko. Now, in the comics, she is a spy and often a love interest of Nick Fury. In the MCU, we've seen her lurking in the background, recruiting people like Yelena and John Walker.
We're gonna need a U.S. agent.
And in Wakanda Forever, we learned that she was the director of the CIA and the ex-wife of one Everett Ross. So Congress is trying to impeach her for creating a superhero off the books, which is interesting. So I always assumed that she was hiring Yelena and Walker on behalf of the government, but she was actually hiring them for Oxcorp, a corporation that she claims she is divested from. Now, in the comics, Ox is a corporation founded by a life model decoy of Val, which is basically a robot duplicate like we saw in the show Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. The organization did first appear in Thunderbolts Volume 5, Number 1, and it was essentially a large shell company. In fact, that issue starts with Bucky hunting down Val, similar to his role in this movie. The representative holding the hearing is Leonard Gary, played by Wendell Pierce. Now, you may know him as Bunk Borland from The Wire.
Jealous bitch.
And this summer, he's also playing Perry White in Superman. Now, Leonard Gary in the comics is actually a mutant. In one issue, when Hydra attacks the Capitol building, he brings statues and objects to life to fight their Nazi robots. So I wonder if his inclusion is a cute hint about the movie's reveal, because he first appeared in the comic Secret Avengers, and this is secretly an Avengers movie. During Val's hearing, she mentions rogue nations, and she's talking about Wakanda. And remember, in Wakanda Forever, she was pressuring the president to create regime change and seize the country's vibranium for the United States. And now we know that was probably so she could use the vibranium to create her own private superhero military force. And she also mentions that, just a few months ago, the president turned into a Red Hulk and raged on top of the White House, referring, of course, to...
Don't say it.
...to Captain America Brave New World. And she also makes sure to point out that there are no Avengers. Following Avengers Endgame, I guess no superheroes decided to band together again, until Brave New World, when Sam finally opted to restart the super team.
The world needs the Avengers.
Val also said says that the onus of the American government is to shield the people. And the choice of words there is interesting because after S.H.I.E.L.D. fell in The Winter Soldier, superheroes have essentially been the world's main superpower. So Val is subtly saying that the government needs to get in the shielding business by controlling superheroes. Now afterwards, she tells Mel that she wants to get rid of any hanging chads.
Who did that to all those guys named Chad?
No, this is a reference to the recounting of the 2000 election in Florida, when the integrity of a ballot was based on how much of a hanging chad was on a piece of paper. Then we go to the Red Guardian, who was the spy father for Natasha and Yelena when they were undercover in Ohio. The Soviet Union gave him super soldier serum and a super identity, the Red Guardian, and for a while, he was a hero of the people. But after he displeased Dreykov, he was sent to a remote prison until his spy daughters rescued him. In his apartment, we see this poster of him as the Red Guardian, wielding a hammer to break a chain. So this calls back to the communist symbol of a hammer to signify the industrial worker. But also this line from the Communist Manifesto: "Workers of the world unite, you have nothing to lose but your chains." So the Red Guardian, the Soviet hero, is freeing the proletariat from the grasp of the bourgeoisie.
Easy, comrade.
Well, actually, Doug, don't worry, because the movie undermines this with his capitalist fervor. At the end of the movie, he is a full-on capitalist, covering their new uniforms and corporate product placements. And he also tells Yelena that what he wants out of life is fame and fortune, which to him brings friendship, love, and cool gloves. He is watching himself in a parade, and notice that his 70s uniform is more comic accurate than the one he wears in modern day. Here we see another Red Guardian poster, and he tells Yelena that the only time he was ever happy was when he was saving people in the streets, foreshadowing the ending of the movie. And right off the bat, he tells Yelena she should join a team and be more like her sister. Because remember, the Avengers are where Nat found her purpose.
I used to have nothing, and then I got this.
Now his business is also called Red Guardian Limo, complete with his signature star for a logo, which was always the focal point of his costume in the comics. Now, Red Guardian was also a member of the 2023 Thunderbolts team, which was led by Bucky Barnes. When he sees Yelena, he tells her that the light in her is dim, even by Eastern European standards. And this is part of the movie's reoccurring theme of light and darkness. Yelena ends up being the bright light that can face off against the void. We also see a photo of Yelena's Pee Wee soccer team, the Thunderbolts, which gives their team their temporary name later in the movie. Now earlier I told you about our Thunderbolts soccer tee collection, and I know that we're also all so excited for the Fantastic Four. So we designed this Thing shirt at our merch store in the style of John Carpenter's The Thing. We also have other fun Marvel parody merch like the I Hate You 3000, Fisk Will Fix It shirt and yard side, the Woo, I'm about to make a name for myself shirt, the Remember It, and the RPG Cap Elevator, where he has two choices, fight or Hail Hydra. We love designing these shirts for you guys, and shopping our merch store really does help out our channel. You can become a member, get free stuff, and help us make videos like this one. Links are below. So Yelena's conversation with her dad leads her to asking Val for something that is more public facing. Deep down, she wants to be an Avenger like Natasha. She saw how her sister found a purpose and a second family, and she wants that for herself. But Val doesn't regard her operative as the public facing type. Now we have seen this in plenty of comics before. In the reboot of Squadron Supreme, the government originally intended to keep two superhero teams, one for Black Ops and one more public facing. And the previously mentioned Secret Avengers team were formed by S.H.I.E.L.D. director Steve Rogers to handle more Black Ops threats. But instead, Val opts to send her potential team to assassinate one another and then to incinerate the survivors. Yelena arrives first, finding ominous clues about what's to come. Black and white photos of dead test subjects in the Hiroshima shadows. But it's important that these photos are in black and white because it's foreshadowing the void and desaturation that's to come later in the movie. But this other page is in color, where we see hairstyle designs for the Sentry. So the Sentry is sort of like Marvel's Homelander. In The Boys, Homelander is a superhero that was created to be a corporate mascot, with every aspect of his uniform and persona carefully crafted by focus testing.
A massive 44% uptake with white males in the Rust Belt.
Oh, yes.
And guys, this first fight was just so much fun. I missed actual Marvel team-ups where characters from completely different franchises interact for the first time. And it's a staple that when superheroes meet for the first time, they always gotta fight. This gives the audience a sense of what they can each do in combat and how they would compare as a team. It's why Thor, Captain America, and Iron Man basically fought to a draw when they first met.
Are we done here?
So let me run through these other heroes with really quick refreshers. John Walker was the government's choice to be the new Captain America until he got roided up on super soldier serum and killed a man in public. Then he was disgraced and took on the name US Agent. Here we can see that his uniform is worn and dirty, just like his shield. It's symbolic of the darkness that he has let overtake his life. And in the post-credit scene, we see that his new uniform is polished, shiny, and new. Ghost can phase through objects because of a childhood accident that entangles her with the quantum realm. And in Ant-Man and the Wasp, the Ant Fam helps to stabilize her with quantum realm particles. Thunderbolts, but they didn't get to finish the job because they were blipped, so she is still phasing all the time.
My ghost likes to phase all the time, phase all the time, phase all the time.
Okay, you good?
Yeah, I'm cool.
And finally, Taskmaster was the daughter of the Red Room director Dreykov, and Natasha thought she killed her on her first mission for S.H.I.E.L.D. But it turns out that this little girl survived, so her dad brainwashed her to become an assassin that copies everybody's moves. And actually, Natasha freeing her from mind control in Black Widow is what brought her character full circle. Natasha thought she was damned for killing this little girl, but then in the movie Black Widow, she's able to liberate her so she can live her life how she chooses until she dies suddenly in this movie. There are lots of cool details during the fight, like we see Yelena using her Widow Stingers, just like Natasha's, and at one point she tries to hit Ghost, but then Ghost phases, so instead she hits Walker. Taskmaster and Walker bang their shields together, similar to when Captain America fought himself in Avengers Endgame. There's also this really fun, relay with the knife, where they all take turns tossing it at one another, and it all builds to a fever pitch with the death of Taskmaster. Then Bob finally comes stumbling out, breaking the tension. Now, he is played by Lewis Pullman, son of Bill Pullman, and actually, Stephen Yeun of The Walking Dead was originally cast in this role, but because of the Hollywood strikes, he had to drop out because of scheduling conflicts. And I think Lewis Pullman is amazing in this part. He embodies the goodness and goofiness in Bob, while always hinting that there's something dark under the surface with this haunted look in his eyes. Now, during the fight, when Bob's cradle is activated, we see a silhouette on the panel, and the dark image foreshadows his eventual heel turn as the Void. After Yelena calls Walker a dime store Captain America, he says,
I'll have you know I was actually the official Captain America, so...
Yeah, for 2 seconds.
Referring to how the government took away his Captain America title in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. So that show ended with him getting a sort of redemption arc. He was chasing down a group of terrorists called the Flag Smashers when one of them killed his partner. So after he was disgraced, he wanted to kill their leader for vengeance, but chose to save people instead.
Yeah, I don't know, person. That's a pretty weak redemption arc.
I agree, but John Walker in the comics is supposed to be like this. He's an a-hole, and you can tell that Wyatt Russell is having a lot of fun playing this role. And then we go to Val's Avengers fundraiser, where she is exploiting the memory of superheroes to make herself look good, which is foreshadowing her actual plan. She wants to use superhero nostalgia to create her own corporate product to enhance her own power.
Alright, so she's basically the Walt Disney Corporation.
That's right. So at the gala, we can see various Avengers silhouettes on the walls, a clever way for her to avoid copyright infringement. But subtly, it's also indicating that these heroes are gone and that somebody has to fill the void. The Avengers A in the lobby is half built, symbolizing how she is in the process of building her new Avengers, led by the Golden Guardian of Good, the Sentry. The staff in the center is Loki's scepter, minus the Mind Stone, which Ultron put into the Vision. This is one of the Chitauri staffs, and Val calls attention to these Chitauri handcuffs. But these weren't actually at the Battle of New York. They're an item in the Guardians of the Galaxy video game, and Bucky must have grabbed them because he uses them to capture Ghost later on. And we also see the bust or body of a Chitauri in this case here. Now, most of this weaponry was gathered up by S.H.I.E.L.D., Damage Control, or Hydra after the Battle of New York. But as we saw in Spider-Man Homecoming and the great short film Item 47, some of these items are also scooped up by regular civilians. Now, Bucky talks to Representative Gary, and at first, he just wants to do things like a covert operative would, like when he clocks the blind spot between different security cameras. So Gary tells him to stop acting like a superhero and be a congressman. Do the required reading.
Yeah, like Tony Stark.
Am I the only one who did the reading?
And at his place, when he's doing the reading, he drops ketchup all over his shirt and the packet. Now, I think this symbolizes how really he's better at spilling blood than living this kind of official government lifestyle. And then we see that instead of washing his shirt, he washed his vibranium arm in the dishwasher. It's a great visual way to show how his extraordinary lifestyle is now being forced to squeeze into these ordinary surroundings. Now, back at the facility, Walker points out the Taskmaster destroyed half of Budapest, referring to the events of the movie Black Widow. And then they all learn that they are about to die. Now, Yelena in particular seems to accept her fate, again showing us just how depressed and on the edge of taking her own life she is at this point. So they have to work together. Sonic cannons are preventing Ghost from phasing, and these cannons are similar to the Stark sonic cannons that we saw the army deploy against the Hulk in The Incredible Hulk. Now, Ava didn't get a lot to do in this movie, but she does get to prove her loyalty twice. She returns to help them escape the fire, and then later she returns with the truck. But this isn't surprising because she has survived her whole life through the kindness of others, people like Bill Foster or the Ant family. Afterwards, Yelena flashes flashes back to her first test in the Red Room, and young Yelena is played by Violet McGraw from Megan. In Age of Ultron, we saw similar dream sequences that showed us the character's worst fears and memories. For Natasha, we saw her complete her final test, to kill a man, and then we saw glimpses of the hysterectomy they performed at her graduation. Now, we've also seen glimpses of the Red Room training in shows like Agent Carter, but this test is even more heartbreaking. She was forced to lure her friend away from the house, knowing she would be executed.
But why?
Probably to prove that she had no attachments except for the assignment. In fact, we saw similar assignments in Kingsman: The Secret Service when agents are forced to kill... Well, never mind. This is the same reason that they sterilized all the Black Widows, so their loyalty to their child wouldn't supersede their loyalty to the state. Now, after she wakes up, we find out that Bob doesn't remember anything after he volunteered, and his amnesia is also adapted from the comics. And we also see him talking to himself, foreshadowing his eventual split identity in the third act. And then Yelena and Bob have this little moment together where he says that he should be left alone in the facility. And like we find out later on, his parents told him that he was no good and he only makes things worse. Bob even repeats this out loud when they get to the top of the elevator later on. And this is when Bob names his alter ego, saying that he and Yelena both know the void, and her advice to shove it all down.
Not a great plan.
And then we come to their second team trial, escaping through a narrow elevator shaft. I loved when Walker tried to use his super strength to go it alone, but fell on his ass. And you know, Bob is the one who brings the team together at the end of the movie, so it's fitting that he's the one who suggests how they can work together when they move up the shaft. And also, the shapes of all of their bodies look like the asterisk that appears at the end of the title. And Yelena says,
So what, we all just punch and shoot?
and this made me laugh out loud because this is exactly what the internet said about the team when they were announced. They all have very similar power sets except for Ghost. Now, not only does Bob mutter, "I always make things worse," like his mentally ill mother said to him in his shame room that we see later on, but even the way he has to struggle to not sneeze is foreshadowing how he loses control of his mind at the end of the film. Now, when they escape the shaft, Walker touches Bob and gets a glimpse of his worst memory, and it's not when he murdered a man in public or was stripped of his Captain America title. He remembers ignoring his kid while his wife was yelling at him. He is looking at an article about himself and his fall from grace, and it features a photo that was taken from his announcement as Captain America at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier Episode 1. So for Walker, losing his career and his honor isn't as shameful as losing his family. Or maybe he just remembers this moment because it's a time when he was most depressed, kind of like when Yelena encounters her drunk self later on. And when he comes to, he's at the edge of the elevator shaft, similar to Yelena on the edge of the building at the start of the movie. Again, this is a metaphor for intense depression. Afterwards, Walker lists his official accomplishments of proof he should be the leader, and he follows up by saying that he won a three-peat of a state football championship, go Bears. And remember, we actually saw his old locker room and his old high school in the second episode of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then Yelena brings up her team, the Thunderbolts, a bunch of losers who never won a game. Just like how all of the characters in this movie are losers who have lost everything that they've ever loved in life. And then Bob brings up that he was a meth addict who dressed up as a chicken to twirl a sign, which is also similar to Meth Head Badger's job in Breaking Bad.
Wow.
See?
Outside, we meet the Ox Commander Holt, played by Chris Bauer from The Wire and True Blood. Now, Val has ordered him to use non-lethal force to capture Bob because she plans on being a nurturing figure to him later. Meanwhile, Yelena has become an actual nurturing figure to Bob, maybe to make up for her past mistakes of not protecting Anya. So to escape, they dress up in bad guy uniforms, a trick as old as The Wizard of Oz or Star Wars: A New Hope. But they're actually saved by Bob, who is willing to sacrifice his life for the greater good. We see this same attitude when he's a kid, stepping in to save his mom. But this also plays into the suicidal tendencies that he and the other Thunderbolts display all throughout the movie. And afterwards, Bob goes through a resurrection similar to Thor or Beast, or because he likens himself to a god, you can read his resurrection and ascension to the sky as a metaphor for the resurrection and ascension of Jesus. I also love the way he flew up in the air. It's very awkward, almost like he was falling up because he has no idea how to control his powers. Now, after the team escapes, Walker feeds them with the cacti, a trick that he would have learned on his tours in Iraq or Afghanistan. And then he and Yelena argue about whether or not Dr. Phil is still in the air. And just right here, I would have loved a little line like, well, Dr. Phil was blipped and then they canceled his show. But it's probably a good thing that every single MCU story is no longer about the blip. And then Yelena gives some closure to Taskmaster, saying that she had a hard, short life. She killed a lot of people, and then she got killed, like us. Again, we're seeing that Yelena is super depressed, and she just expects to die. She's suicidal because, like Bob, she thinks that she is always going to be alone. But I'm also wondering if Taskmaster's death might have been because of the fan backlash over the role. Like, Taskmaster in the comics is hilarious, and he's more like Deadpool. So reinventing him as a silent assassin is more like what they did to Deadpool in X-Men Origins Origins Wolverine. Come to think of it, they each go out in the same way, don't they? Now they're kind of rescued by Alexei, who gives us some exposition comparing himself to John Walker, saying they're both a second coming of Captain America. And then he tells Yelena that she has assembled an impressive group, with the word assemble also hinting at the twist ending that these are the new Avengers. And there was like this little moment here when Alexei looks at her and says these people have made the light return to her eyes. And Florence Pugh just kind of looks away and down, and man, that floored me. She wanted a family, and now she's found one. So to keep this metaphor of the light going, Alexei says that their team can bring light from the darkness, and they can appear on the Wheaties box, which of course we talked about in our Indian Explained video. And then Val's convoy catches up to them. Ghost tries to phase into vehicles like she did in Ant-Man and the Wasp, but the sonic cannons stop her. Alexei makes a literal Molotov cocktail, but they are finally saved by Bucky. First, he blows up a Humvee using a modified FN Mk13 grenade launcher to shoot a magnetized disc to the undercarriage. This is the same way he blew up Fury's SUV in The Winter Soldier. And when he steals one of their shotguns, his mid-air spin and cock is lifted directly from this sweet move from Arnold Schwarzenegger in Terminator 2. Now Bucky stops the last vehicle with its own tow cable to stop it in its tracks using his vibranium arm and super strength. And he did this because he wanted to save his last grenade for the limo. You get the feeling that everybody else here is just plain at being a superhero, but Bucky is the only one who actually knows what he's doing. Now Alexei recognizes him immediately, but only through reputation. They probably knew of each other during the Cold War, although Alexei worked for the Russian government and the Winter Soldier was a Hydra asset based in Russia. The two of them, however, did meet in What If Season 3, Episode 3, What If the Red Guardian Stopped the Winter Soldier. It was, for my money, the best episode of that season. And, just like this movie, that episode ends with the Red Guardian joining the Avengers. Meanwhile, Representative Gary is taking questions from WHIH, the Marvel Cinematic Universe's in-universe news station that used to produce really fun internet-only segments leading up to movies like Captain America Civil War. And then we finally find out who bought Avengers Tower and Spider-Man Homecoming, and it was Val. Now you'll remember that this was originally built as Stark Tower, and then Tony converted it into Avengers Tower, but at the end of Age of Ultron they moved to an old S.H.I.E.L.D. facility in upstate New York. Val has renamed it the Watchtower, which is an amazing full circle moment. You see, in the comics, the Avengers headquarters was always at a mansion, and the Sentry's headquarters was a skyscraper called the Watchtower. Now, the Avengers did not have a skyscraper headquarters until they moved into the Watchtower, and it became Avengers Tower. And now, she has added this incredibly gaudy gold to the front of the tower to match the Sentry's colors. But really, gold towers just kind of mar the skyline of Manhattan. Now, while Val is trying to control Bob, she accidentally gets a touch of the Void. She sees her worst memory, when her father was killed because she led his enemies to their home. And you can see how this would motivate Val for the rest of her entire life. She felt small and powerless in this moment, so she'll spend the rest of her life seeking strength and power. And this is what she offers Bob. She tells him that he is perfect. He is Earth's mightiest hero, which of course is usually the nickname of the Avengers.
The Avengers. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
Now when Bob wakes up, he doesn't know where he is. And this is similar to Steve Rogers waking up at the end of the first Avenger.
Where am I?
You're in a recovery room in New York City.
Now we keep seeing scenes like this throughout this film because this team is a dark mirror to the Avengers. Instead of having a person who is a soldier in World War II, 3 of the team members once fought for enemies of the United States, and the other was a Black Ops assassin. Also, Val is like the anti-Nick Fury. Fury believed in heroes, and he believed in giving them free will.
They've gone their separate ways. We get into a situation like this again, what happens then?
They'll come back.
But Val believes that there's just the bad guy and the worst guy, and she has a kill switch installed to control Bob. Now, after Val talks to him, she's ready to pull away and give him time, but the comic-accurate Sentry logo intrigues him. Bob has always been told for his entire life that he couldn't help, and he only makes things worse. But as we saw earlier, he does genuinely want to do some good. So, just like in the comics, he sees being a superhero as a way to find his self-worth. Meanwhile, Bucky captures the Thunderbolts, intending to bring them as evidence to the committee to force them to testify against Val. He doesn't even see them as people, he sees them as stuff to present to the committee. Now he's still trying to have it both ways, to let the committee do its work, but bringing them witnesses with his superhero antics. After he lets them go, he gives them his own pep talk, telling them that burying their past, like Yelena suggested, does not work and they have to face their traumas. Remember, Bucky already worked all this out in therapy and he has made his amends.
I'm no longer the Winter Soldier. I'm James Bucky Barnes, and you're part of my efforts to make amends.
On the way there, they all get to bond and learn about each other's weapons. And this is also reminding the audience who they are and what they can do. For instance, Bucky and Alexei talk about their serums.
What kind of super serum did you get?
I don't know, regular. Hydra.
Hydra.
Oh, fancy.
While Yelena describes her weaponry. Now in this scene, Bucky says he doesn't get tired, which I don't think it's true. We saw him sleeping in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Or maybe like he can just go full tilt until it's time to sleep and he doesn't wear down.
Yeah, that's my secret person. I am always sleepy.
Now, when they burst into the lobby, my favorite detail from the fight was that Bucky rips the door off his hinges to use it as a shield, just like Steve did in First Avenger. Now, Steve doing that foreshadowed him eventually getting his Captain America shield, and Bucky was once Captain America in the comics. So maybe this is foreshadowing that Bucky will eventually get a shield of his own. And there's a fun Marvel cameo here. If this guard looks familiar, it's because that's your mom. So the team enters the penthouse together in the elevator, and again, this is the mirror opposite of the Avengers. When we saw them get into the elevator in Endgame, they were going down, but the Thunderbolts are going up. One team exits while the other is entering. And Val reminisces about all the fights that happened here, specifically the fight against Loki and the fight against Ultron and whatever other battles happened between movies that we never got to see. When they enter, notice that Val is making herself a drink from the same bar where Tony Stark made a drink when he stood off with Loki.
And you, big fella, you've managed to piss off every single one of them.
That was the plan.
Not a great plan.
And, like Tony Stark, she's able to systematically tear down everybody in the room. She mocks Yelena for wanting a forward-facing role, calls Walker the JV Captain America, and for a football hero, being called Junior Varsity is a real stink.
Don't call me Junior. Why would you call him that?
And she mocks Bucky for being an inept congressman.
Yeah, well, he'd fit right in with the bunch of knuckleheads we got in there right now. Am I right, comment section?
Someone answer him now!
Yeah, but again, we're seeing Val as the inverse here. But Tony used his time at the bar to talk up the team.
The Avengers. That's what we call ourselves. Sort of like a team. Earth's mightiest heroes type thing.
While Val is tearing them down in a very Tony Stark way. For instance, she looks at Red Guardian and says,
"Who is this old Santa?"
Which is similar to Tony saying this.
Hank Pym always said you never can trust a Stark.
Who are you?
Again, we're seeing these people as a dark mirror to the Avengers, just as the Void is a dark mirror to the Sentry. And then Bob enters in his full Sentry costume, and he looks great. Comic accurate, just silly enough, and Lewis Pullman immediately gives the Sentry this kind of detached air, like he's watching himself do and say things from across the room. We're already seeing that as he unlocks his powers, his mind is beginning to split. There are all these little details to show how godlike he is. There's this shot where he stops bullets like Neo in the Matrix. And remember, Neo did this after he was resurrected with his own godlike powers as the One. Just as here, we're seeing Bob fully unlock his powers for the first time. And in this scene, we do see the team start to work together. Like when he hurls the bullets at Bucky, Walker steps in to stop them with his shield. And then afterwards, the Sentry bends his shield back like a taco. Then the Ghost tries to ambush Sentry, and notice how he is even able to see her as she faces around him, like his senses can even detect movements through the quantum realm.
Is that how her powers work?
No one knows. During the fight, Bucky is knocked down and gets his very own I can do this all day kind of moment. And then he does the leaping punch that he used against Steve in the Winter Soldier, but Bob just detaches his arm like Io did in Falcon and the Winter Soldier. And then Yelena hops on his back to stink him like Natasha has done many times over the years to take down more powerful enemies, and he barely notices. The point is, this is not an enemy the Thunderbolts could beat with their fists. Like the only Avenger that probably could have taken him down was Wanda Maximoff just by getting into his head. And I loved how afterwards everybody is just out of breath and worn out because, again, these are the opposite of the Avengers. These are ordinary people, not gods. Bob even tells Val, they're not even a threat to me, so why should I kill them? And down on the street, Yelena has her meltdown where she talks about how they're all useless. Now, if we're comparing this to the first Avengers movie, this is similar to Bruce Banner's "We're not a team" moment.
Man, what are we, a team? No, we're a chemical mixture that makes chaos.
Again, everything in this movie is going to have a dark parallel to the first Avengers film. While above, in the penthouse, Bob reasons that, since he is more powerful than Thor, that he himself must be a god. And Val should have seen this coming because his psych profile included delusions of grandeur. Mel steps up to save Val's life, and by the way, I am looking forward to her being a side member of the team. Like she's the person who coordinates all of their missions and optimizes them for like mass public appeal. Meanwhile, down on the street, Florence Pugh puts on a clinic, breaking down and telling her dad that she feels so alone. And then he reminds her that on her Pee Wee soccer team, she wanted to be the goalie because she knew everybody could rely on her. She's always been a team leader, somebody who can see the best and worst in people. And more importantly, he says that she walks into a room and makes it bright. Back to the movie's theme of bringing light to fight the darkness of depression. And she realizes realizes this just in time because the Void wakes up and wreaks havoc in Midtown. Now, I should note that this is the same location where the Avengers first assembled, except they assembled on the overpass on 42nd Street on the other side of the building, while the new Avengers are on the opposite side of the building beneath the overpass. It's a subtle way to indicate that these Avengers are different. They're a little more broken, and they're not the elite gods and heroes that first assembled a decade or so ago. But the attacks do share some action beats. Like there's a moment where Alexei flips Yelena into the air, just like another super soldier, Steve Rogers, flipped Natasha into the air. And it is just so nice seeing superheroes just saving lives again. It made the movie feel grounded, like it had actual stakes. Now, when the Void first attacks, he destroys a crane, which rips through the golden edifice of the building, symbolically saying that the Sentry is gone and he's been replaced by the Void. And the big hero moment is Walker saving the civilian, but then everybody pitching in just to make sure that he is not crushed. Like, these are not heroes that can just throw buildings around. They are broken people fighting against all odds just to survive for one more day. And there are so many other fun moments in this fight. Bucky stopping the bus and Alexei saving this little girl. Like, the civilians here feel like real people, so it is a shock when the Void blips her out of existence. This is why Yelena eventually decides to embrace Bucky's advice. Rather than ignore the past, she faces her darkness and enters the Void. She will not be responsible for the death of another young girl. And when she enters the Void, there is a parallel here with her opening scene when she jumps off the building. We've already seen that she is brave enough to step into the unknown. And by the way, small aside, I wonder how Mayor Fisk is going to react to this fight. While he's cracking down on vigilantes, a superhuman just forced 8 million people to experience their worst memories. I mean, what did Fisk see?
If you like pina coladas.
Yelena is back in her nightmare, but notice how now we can tell that the woods are actually a painted background. And then the way she runs through that wall and the camera tilts into the next scene was a technique also used in the film Being John Malkovich, when they run through John Malkovich's memories. Charlie Kaufman wrote similar scenes in Eternal Sunshine of the Spotless Mind, when Joel's consciousness retreats into different memories to prevent being erased. Now, Anya drops a book in the snow called Cherpoika. It is a Russian folktale about a girl made out of snow. Now, this girl is both innocent and beautiful, but she is unable to love because she doesn't understand human emotion. But when she does finally experience human emotion, she melts. And this metaphor is appropriate because this is who Yelena became on this day. After she helped kill her friend, she had to shut herself off from attachments to others because otherwise she was worried she would experience hurt and pain. She sees herself in the Red Room, which looks actually very similar to the place where Natasha was trained, and after she's the first at assembling her weapon, it causes the other girls to get whipped. So this is teaching her the same lesson that young Bob learned. When she tries to do good, other people suffer. Now, outside, they all enter the Void. And I personally would have liked to have seen what Ghost encountered. Walker got his flashback, but we know nothing about Ava's past. Or, you know, we could have seen Walker reenacting the murder of the guy in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and then maybe at least he would seem remorseful for his actions. And then, much like Joel in Eternal Sunshine, Bob finds a safe room to hide in. Now, through the floorboards below, we see part of his trauma. He believes that he is a bad person who always makes things worse for others. But the other team members find him, and then they have to fight off the room itself. And this is symbolic of how escaping our traumas instead of dealing with them eventually will destroy us. And I loved Bucky's line here about how his past is totally cool and he had nothing to worry about. Again, Bucky worked through his shit in therapy, so he's actually the most emotionally mature person in this group. And then they have to briefly fight Bob when he was a chicken twirling a sign. And did anybody else think this was a tongue-in-cheek reference to Peter Griffin fighting the chicken in Family Guy?
That nice chicken outside gave me this coupon.
I'm sorry, this is expired.
You son of a...
And finally, they end up at Bob's lowest point, the moment when his worst fears were confirmed. He is a monster who only hurts people. Now this, of course, is the same lab Yelena destroyed in the opening sequence, and Bob sees himself as the Void. Now, he looks so comic accurate. Like in the books, the Void is just a silhouette with eyes and a mouth, the polar opposite of the golden guardian of good that Val is trying to promote. And I loved this moment, where Bob thinks he can defeat his inner demon by punching it, but instead, being violent and hating yourself only makes the problem worse.
Wow, that's really deep.
He slowly starts to be engulfed by the Void. And, just like in the climax of Eternal Sunshine, the room falls apart around him. Bob insists that he is stronger than the Void, but what is strength? Is it being able to punch harder, or is strength being able to admit that you need help? Yelena is the first person to break free of her trauma and embrace him, and a group hug saves the day. And I thought this was incredibly refreshing. I don't need to see another sky beam, or lasers shooting out of someone's hands, or the cartoon violence that we saw at the end of Deadpool and Wolverine. The Avengers could not have defeated the Void. Only people as sad and broken as the new Avengers could step in and actually relate to Bob. And then in the outside world, the shadow fades from New York, and the city is fully saturated with color once again. Like, notice how, like, for the first time in the whole movie, there is a rich, vibrant color palette. And this is because our characters have all found purpose in their lives. And, just like in the comics, Bob has no memory of anything that happened. And then Val baits them into walking through a curtain, and she announces what the asterisk means: the New Avengers. And I am so hyped about this. We finally got a new Avengers team, and they're weird and they're different. This makes me so excited for the next chapter of the MCU. Now, the Avengers have revealed their lineups publicly like this several times in the comics, like starting all the way back in Avengers number 16 when Hawkeye, Scarlet Witch, and Quicksilver joined the team. But there was also when Tony introduced the New Avengers, or when Norman Osborn introduced his Dark Avengers. And remember, in the MCU, Tony was going to announce Spider-Man as a new Avenger in the press conference in Spider-Man Homecoming. It's also part of this idea that in this world, just like in our world, superheroes are celebrities. They command media attention and captivate the public imagination. But Yelena recognizes what this actually means. Val may be bankrolling their operation, but they have so much dirt on her that they are actually in control. And when the title is revealed, the full Avengers theme plays, and it's good to be home, isn't it?
Finally. Some good food.
But then we see part of the press backlash, with headlines calling them the B-Vengers, which is funny because when Marvel Studios began, there were articles about how they were trying to make B-list superheroes profitable. We also see the heard around the world, Walker riding his taco shield like Slim Pickens at the end of Doctor Strangelove. Yelena appears as Rosie the Riveter, but asking, can we do it? And we see the team as Washington crossing the Delaware, and my favorite, the team appearing as construction workers building 30 Rock in the 1930s, which takes us into the post-credit scene. Now, we already broke down the mid and post-credit scene in our Ending Explained video, so I don't want to go too far into that. I will say, though, that earlier in the movie, they mocked Walker's helmet, and now he's replaced it with the beret, which is appropriate because he was an Army Ranger, and this is part of their official uniform. Now, director Jake Shear has basically confirmed that they filmed the post-credit scene on the set of Avengers Doomsday. So that means that this conflict they hint about, Sam versus them, is going to continue on in this movie.
What do you mean?
Well, Captain America Brave New World ended with Sam Wilson deciding to form his own team of Avengers, but Val beat him to the punch. So Sam is now going to be starting his own squad, while the new squad have the legitimacy of financing and also Avengers Tower. And I'm thinking this conflict could still be going at the start of the movie and could be a kind of type of Civil War event that allows Doom to win initially against these heroes. But we will talk about all that in our What's Next video because we have a ton of theories and we cannot wait to talk about this movie more with you guys. But what did you guys think of the movie? Let me know down in the comments below, or at me on Twitter, Blue Sky, Threads, or our free to join Discord server. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.